Hello everyone, I am Dr. Rashmi Chawla and today I've come up with an important topic of cost and management accounting. In our previous video, we had discussed about the cost concepts, the fundamentals of cost drivers, cost objects, cost units, cost centers, and we discussed briefly about the elements of cost. Today we'll be discussing in details about what are the elements of cost. So let's discuss. When we talk about the elements of cost, you can see the flow chart that has been made. There are basically three elements of cost: material, labor, and expenses, which we call overheads. When we talk about material, material can be again classified into direct material and indirect material cost. Again, when we talk about labor, labor can be classified into direct labor cost and indirect labor cost. And when we talk about expenses, expenses can further be classified into direct expenses and indirect expenses. When we combine all the indirect part of material, labor and expenses, we get an aggregate of overheads. And when we classify overheads, we generally get three types of overheads. One is the factory overheads. The second one is the office and administration overheads. The third one is the selling and distribution overheads. So we'll be discussing about each element of cost in details now. The first one, we said material is an important and the first element of cost. It can be direct material, it can be indirect material. So first we discuss about what is direct material. See, direct material is material that can be directly identified with each unit of the product. Direct material can be conveniently measured and directly charged to the product. For example, raw cotton in textile manufacturers, sugarcane in sugar industry, and leather for shoemaking industry. The cost of direct material includes the following: all types of raw materials issued from the store. Then we can say raw materials specifically purchased for the specific job or project. Or we can say raw materials transferred from one cost center to the another cost center. Next, what can be included in direct material? Primary packing material like cartons, cardboard boxes, etc. So this was all about direct material cost. That means all costs which can be directly attributed towards the production, that is a direct material cost. Indirect material, they are those materials which do not normally form a part of the finished product. It has been defined as materials which cannot be allocated but which can be apportioned to or absorbed by cost centers or cost units. These are stores used in maintenance of machinery and buildings, like lubricants, if you are using lubricants for the repair of machinery, or cotton waste, bricks and cements. Second category of indirect material example is stores used by the service departments. That is non-productive departments like powerhouse, boiler house and canteen, etc. The third example we can give for the indirect materials is materials which, due to their cost being small and negligible, are not considered worthwhile to be treated as direct materials. We can give an example over here, like if any company is manufacturing a shirt, so in that case the cost of the needle or the thread or the buttons which are being used, we can call it as indirect materials, their cost being negligible and small. Now we come to another element of cost, that is labor. So labor can be classified into direct labor and indirect labor. So first we discuss about the direct labor. Direct labor is the labor that can be identified directly with a unit of finished product. All the labor charges expended in altering the construction, composition, conformation or condition of the product is included in it. It includes the payment of direct wages made to the following groups of direct labor. Direct labor engaged on the actual production of the product. Second, direct labor engaged in adding this manufacture by way of supervision, maintenance, and tool setting, etc. Then the third one, which includes direct labor, are inspectors, analysts, etc., especially required for such production. Now we come to indirect labor. Indirect labor, the wages of that labor which cannot be allocated but which can be apportioned or to absorbed by cost centers or cost units is known as indirect labor. In other words, wages paid to labor which are employed other than or production constitute indirect labor costs. Examples of indirect labor are charge hands and supervisors, maintenance workers, labor employed in service departments, material handling and internal transport, apprentices, trainees, instructors, factory clerical staff, and labor employed in time and security office. We come to the third element of cost, that is expenses. It can be further classified into direct and indirect expenses, or we can call chargeable expenses. What are direct expenses or chargeable expenses? They include all expenditures other than direct material and direct labor that are specifically incurred for a particular product or job. Such expenses are charged directly to the particular cost account concerned as part of the prime cost. Examples of direct expenses are excise duty, royalty, surveyor's fees, cost of rectifying defective work, travelling expenses to the job, experimental expenses of projects, expenses of designing, drawings, repairs and maintenance of plant obtained on hire and hire of special equipment obtained for a contract. Now we come to indirect expenses. Indirect expenses are expenses which cannot be allocated but which can be apportioned or absorbed by cost centers or cost units as rent, insurance, municipal taxes, salary of manager, canteen, welfare expenses, power and fuel, then cost of training for new employees, lighting and heating, telephone expenses, etc. Now, what are overheads? As the flow chart depicts, we include all the indirect portion of material, labor and expenses, we get what is overheads. So overheads may be defined as the cost of indirect material, indirect labor and such other expenses including services as cannot conveniently be charged direct to specific cost units. Thus overheads are all expenses other than the direct expenses. Now overheads may be divided into the following categories. The first one is factory or works overhead. It covers all indirect expenditure incurred by the undertaking for the receipt of the order till completion is ready for dispatch either to the customer or to the finished goods store. The overheads also include depreciation on plant and machinery, buildings and equipment, insurance charges on fixed assets, repairs and maintenance of fixed assets, electricity charges, coal and other fuel charges, rent, rates and taxes of works, etc. We come to the second overheads, that is office and administrative overheads. It consists of all expenses incurred in the direction, control and administration of a factory. Examples are expenses in running the general office, example office rent, light, heat, salaries, salary to secretaries and all accountants, general managers, directors, executives, investigations and experiments and miscellaneous fixed charges. Last, overheads, we call it as selling and distribution overheads. comprise the cost of products or distribution, of soliciting and recurring orders for the articles of commodities dealt in, and efforts to find and retain customers. It includes sales, expenses, office expenses, salesman salaries, commission, showroom expenses, advertisement charges, fancy packing, samples, and free gifts, after sales service, expenses and demonstration and technical advice to potential customers. See, these were all about selling. When we talk about distribution overheads, it comprises of all expenditure incurred from the time the product is completed in the work until it reaches its destination. It includes warehouse rent, warehouse staff salaries, insurance, expenses on delivery vans and trucks, expenses on special packing for bulk transport, losses in warehouse stocks, and finished goods, damage in transit, and cost of repairing, etc. So this was all about the elements of cost. So again, to conclude, I would like to say that elements of cost are of three types: material, labor, and expenses. They are again classified into direct and indirect. Like in case of material, direct labor and indirect material, indirect material and indirect material. In case of labor, direct labor and indirect labor, and expenses, direct expenses and indirect expenses. Now, what are overheads? Overheads comprise of all those expenses which are not directly allocated to a particular product or a cost unit, and these generally are made up of indirect material, indirect labor, and indirect expenses. When we divide the overheads, we get three types of overheads. All those overheads which are related to factory are factory overheads. Then we get the office and administrative overheads which are related to administration expenses, and then we come to the selling and distribution overheads. So this was all about the elements of cost. Hope you understood and liked the class. Thank you so much.